After all this time, we have a website. I am very excited to announce our new home online at themoreyouKnow.com. Take a peek around, see our guests, and connect with them. Find out more about this podcast. We also have exciting news coming very soon about our donations page and raising some money for a local cause. But until then, enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome to the NoCo, the podcast made for the community of Northern Colorado so that you, the listener, might feel better connected and in awe of those people around you. I am your host, Ivan Wayne. Buckle up. How often do you let yourself play? How do you create art? Today we will hear from someone who helps children and adults alike explore the world of art to have fun, but to also allow children to express themselves when words may not suffice. Her studio in Loveland is a fascinating place, and I found out I had a bit more in common with this guest than many of our guests on the podcast. So without delay, here is Jules Gillen. I sit here in person with Jules Gillen, our guest on this episode, and she front runs Juiced on Imagination. So welcome, hello.
Hello.
And what is Juiced on Imagination?
Juiced on Imagination is an expressive arts therapy studio for children. So technically what I do is I help people make art for wellness reasons if you're not able to communicate verbally. So if you're not able to use words, I help you to make art when words fail. So Juiced on Imagination is mainly involves children, but I also, as an expressive therapist, I work with adults and other populations as well too, but Juiced is mainly focuses on the children.
So you wanted this specifically to be a medium where children or just individuals could express themselves if they had difficulty otherwise.
Right. Your brain actually forms images before you form words. That's how we learn to speak. So it's actually our most primitive form of communication is to make art. So if you're blocked intuitively, it's a really great way to help you speak. Also for kids, it has other really amazing benefits. It boosts your self-esteem. It helps with your self-confidence, problem solving. It helps with school, different things, socialization, community.
Yeah. So are you specifically asking kids, like, do you have anything you're struggling with? Let's paint that. Or, how do you walk through this process with people?
Kind of depends on how you are coming to me. If you're coming to me, if mom and dad have called and said, this is what we're working on, we kind of go that way. So a session would be if you came in and sat down, pretty much to how we're just talking now. I'm like, hey, Wayne, how are you? I'm going to give you some tools to play with, kind of let you see what resonates with you. And then we'll just kind of start a dialogue from there. I'll talk to you about what you're drawing, and it just kind of moves organically.
Yeah. And then do these sessions just kind of continue? Like, I guess I'm just curious how this unfolds with people. And I'm selfishly fascinated because this is the first time I've heard of a studio that's like this.
Oh, thank you.
Because typically, you think, oh, I just want my child to get better at art. Or my child loves painting, so I just want to send them to a studio. But this is true expression and helping people live, hopefully, a better life.
There's value with helping with mental illnesses as well, with the production of art as well. It affects your serotonin levels, so it helps with your depression. It's a really great modality to verbalize. So a session would be pretty much like just sitting here. I'll give you tools. We'll see what resonates with you, and we'll just let it unfold organically where it goes.
And then just as long as that child enjoys coming back, and the parents enjoy it, then they'll keep coming.
Right. I would say I usually suggest at least 4 sessions to see where we're going, because session 1 might feel a little awkward. And I also work along beside you too. So it's not just like I'm sitting here watching you make art. So I will make something along with you too. So usually takes a good session or 2 to kind of open up and get talking and develop a trust with that person before. And then we go from there.
And how has this journey been for you? So first, how long have you been doing this?
This will be my 10th year.
10th year.
10th year.
And have you altered, adjusted as a person, or, how's this process unfolded?
It's been organic as well, because when I actually started Juiced on Imagination, the name came from when I originally started, I started to work mainly with an adult population, and specifically people who had self-esteem issues and eating disordered issues. I also opened my business in the heart of the horrible recession that we just experienced not long ago. And a lot of people will not always spend money on themselves, so they'll do things to help their kids. So slowly it just kind of evolved into more of a child-friendly environment. So now I'm separating. So Juice now will just become an organization that focuses mainly on children. And then separately, I'll have my own therapy for adults under my own name, just Jules Gillen. So there'll be two. Am I answering the question? So yeah, 10 years. So yes, it's kind of happened organically. A lot of things have transpired and come about throughout the 10 years.
We are here to talk about literally whatever you'd like to talk about. You're the guest of honor.
Well, thank you.
So you could say, Ivan, that is a crap question. I'd rather tell you about this.
I'd rather tell you about this.
Yeah.
It's just evolved really organically. So I see clients on a one-on-one basis where you come to my studio now is in my home. So people come to my home studio. The rest of my work is mainly mobile. So I do classes all day long at the city of Fort Collins on Thursdays. I'm over at the Creative Center at Carnegie. And then I do the same over here in my home studio on Tuesdays, just back to back. So I go from mommy and me to my oldest clients are in their 90s.
Yeah, so this is your home space, you said.
We're in my home space, so you see a little, not everything in here once you look around is child friendly, but that is also my form of expression too. So I think there's a healthy voice to be heard by expressing yourself no matter what it is to be able to get that out there.
Yeah, and so today we are here at Art Space, which is this fascinating enterprise area that I had no idea about until I walked in today. And it's a building full of people who are trying to be creative or they're an artist in some way. And wherever they work also is where they live.
Yes, they're live work studios. We also have our own gallery space and produce our own shows down there. So we are based in Loveland next to the Feed and Grain. So there's about 30 different artists who live in here, and it ranges from anywhere between writers and poets to installation artists, myself. There's a variety of us in here.
Yeah, you took me on a tour before we sat down and recorded, and there was just all types of stuff throughout the hall. It looked like an art walk, but this is an apartment building.
It's someone's home, yes. And then also in our gallery space, when I decided to become more mobile and I left my studio at Lola's, when you heard from Carrie a few weeks ago, I actually teach a lot of classes downstairs in the gallery space too. So we're able to utilize that as workshop space too. So I hold workshops down there too. So it's very lovely to be able to live, work in your own space.
Yeah. Were you surprised when you started this Juice on Imagination idea for adults and then you saw a bigger or an unmet need for children?
I was surprised. I kept trying to, this will be a perfect example of whatever the universe has in mind for you. It's going to come to you no matter what. So the more I would try to veer away from working with kids, the more they would come with me. When I opened my satellite studio, I had a studio above Closed Pony in Fort Collins for many, many years. And I opened a satellite one here in Loveland, which is how I eventually come to make Loveland my home. And I was adamant, okay, I'm going to separate these businesses right now. Closed Pony is going to be child friendly, the new one just for adults. And the next thing you know, kids. So obviously this is what I meant to do, and I do love it. So I'm very, very grateful, and everyone should be so blessed to get up every day and paint and enjoy children. It's amazing to find that that's what you do for a living, is playing with paint and kids.
Yes, I agree. Although as a 7th grade math teacher, there were some evenings where I wondered if what I had chosen to do with my life was appropriate. So
I think that would be challenging. I think junior high kids can be a little challenging.
Yes, but that's why it was such a great experience to have and to be there for those kids who are going through utter chaos in their own brains, and then try to tell them, hey, there's this thing called mathematics that is very important, and I hope that you get some grasp on it because you're going to need it in a few years. So where did your journey start with art?
I grew up in rural Oklahoma and kind of cutting and pasting my own things together, making clothes for my Barbies, doing the whole 9 yards. And eventually, when I finished school, from high school, I went to art school in Denver, and my first schooling or education is in fashion illustration and design. And then I decided that it's much easier as an artist to go out and get a job, a 9-to-5 job, so you know how much money you have coming in. And so I kind of, the more you get wrapped up in the 9-to-5 job and the comfort zone of being able to pin on that money, the further away I got from my art. And then when I moved here to Colorado, my intent was just to start over and just live as a creative.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So you went to the Denver Institute of Art, right?
Colorado.
And then you moved away from Colorado.
I moved back home to Oklahoma.
Okay.
Moved back home to Oklahoma. Part. Yes.
And then something drew you back.
Then, yes, my brother went to school at CSU here, and I visited frequently, and I had formed my own circle of friends. So one day I decided I'm going to move. So I went home, packed up my dog and everything I could get in my Explorer, and I just moved and started over here. And so now that was 21 years ago.
And how long did it take after you got back to Fort Collins in Colorado to start doing art as priority number one?
Honestly, probably a good 10 years. Same thing. I moved out here. I used to be the field trainer for Gymboree, the little kids clothing company. So I trained and hired all their management staff. And then I decided this really isn't where I want to be. So I took some time off to do some really deep thinking and some soul searching and what mattered most. And then I went back to school about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and then started with the art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've had some guests who had some stints living in Oklahoma, but I think you're the first who is also from Oklahoma. We were chatting about that before we sat down here to record. How, from the panhandle of rural Oklahoma, did you decide to come to Denver for school?
My grandparents, when I was younger, had racehorses. So I grew up next to my grandparents who had a ranch, and they had racehorses, and we would come out to Denver frequently with them to go. And I loved Colorado. And then my brother, like I said, moved to Fort Collins, and I just sort of followed.
And here you are.
And here I am.
For over 20 years.
Yeah, for over 20 years.
So I was reading on your website that you said healing occurs through art. And I kind of wanted to jump into this because I agree. And I think it's a very interesting point because I went through a phase in life where I painted almost on a daily basis. And some people may be surprised to hear about that. But you don't have to be a painter to paint. You don't have to be an artist to make art. And so how do you think people can heal from being artistic?
It reduces your stress level, helps with boost your immune system. There are so many benefits. But if someone were just to take, the creating of art is the same as working any muscle or anything that you want to do. So if you were to just set aside 30 minutes a day, even just scribble, color in a coloring book, any of those things. And the more you use it, the more creative you'll become. And it's not really so much about, I'm very process based. So it's not always about the product. It's the process of what you're creating. You have an entire lifetime to learn fundamentals and techniques, but the process and the desire and the passion to do it has to come first before the rest. So just taking that time just to do it, just to explore with, even just close your eyes and scribble and open your eyes and see what it is.
Now, I can hear some naysayers already. People are getting in their own heads. Self-efficacy jumps in and says, I'm not an artist. Art's not for me. So what do you have for people who say that, oh, that's not for me?
Everyone is an artist, like I said. Art is our most basic, primitive form of communication. Everyone is a creative in some ways, even from not thinking about just what you do artistically as painting or a sculptor, but the way you live in your home, designing your home to be a soul space or being surrounded by things that you love, that's a form of art. Your way that you dress is a form of expression as well. So everybody has creative ways. Cooking, gardening, all of those things are creative ways.
Yeah. If you think about the first languages, this is always a fascinating part in human history for me to unravel. We had to come up with a set of verbal signals that we could communicate ideas. And there was no syntax yet. There was no sentences. It was just basic words. And you got to think that before that, people were communicating in nonverbal ways. They were making paintings, they were showing things, they were displaying and wearing things before they had words for it. And I think that connects to your point exactly. Of, like, this is a very primitive pre-language part of our brains.
Well, even before we have a written word or an alphabet, which is what determines you from a primitive culture, you have symbols that form your language as well.
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, how people came up with those symbols. Like, that is a creative process in itself. Like, why does an R look like an R? Why is an M an M? And just simple, basic things that we grow up and we know how to write M's and R's and O's, but we don't stop. A lot of times we don't stop to think about, like, where they came from.
What was the basis in
people
that?
Designed it, you know? So I just think that's super neat. And also, you had mentioned that you think we get to know ourselves better when we jump into art.
It's a great way to communicate with yourself. I am a huge fan of collage work, so I don't have as many pieces in here as I normally do of my own work for collage, but it's a really great way to tap into your intuitive process, to tap into that unconsciousness, to start speaking. Did that answer the question?
Well, do you think people...
I'm like looking around trying to find something with collage on it to illustrate what I'm saying.
Do you think people would be more willing to express something in art that they wouldn't necessarily tell themselves? Or do you think it is when you change the name of the game, when you change the medium, people may find things that they weren't even like aware of? Like, you know, how is this that I can't go for a walk in the park and have the same experience as sitting down and just expressing myself?
I think that it works intuitively. So when you start putting things out there, you might not be aware that you're putting certain symbols or certain shapes or certain things are going into every piece of work, which was why I suggested the 4 weeks. Sometimes you don't see. One woman had a lot of back pain, but she kept thinking, oh, I'm so far beyond the pain medication and I'm not bothered by this anymore. But you could see in her work, everything has different spines or ribs. And so things that you might not think about, or if you're not able to verbalize over a course of time, it will start to tell a story. Then maybe you can use those words when you look at that story. Well, I feel this way. Or you could use an image to say, this is how I feel, when you might not have those words to put that out there. You might not even know what you're feeling. You just know something's not quite right.
Yeah, so I'd ask about the subconscious, but do you think it's also like a willingness? Like, some people are so used to expressing themselves in thought and words that it's like they just aren't willing to grapple with that in a verbal way. But then the second I have a blank canvas and I'm encouraged to walk through this, maybe there's something that unlocks it, says it's okay for me to express in this form. And it's just something that they maybe haven't
to give yourself permission to do
Yeah.
that. Give yourself permission to play. I actually have a workshop called Breaking the Rules where I have adults come, and it is all about unblocking your creative process. So we use a lot of child-friendly tools. We use finger paint and shaving cream, anything that just kind of gives you permission to play and help let go of that thought that I can't make art. I'm not an artist. It just kind of helps you. It feels more playful than sitting here with a pencil and trying to say, if I gave you a pencil, you're in a blank canvas. It's a little scary. But if I gave you the finger paint, you're like, yes. I remember when I could do this when I was little, and you just automatically start to explore that medium and play with it. And then it goes in segments and kind of helps open a gateway.
Yeah. In my opinion, unfortunately, a lot of adults are sent the message that playtime is for childhood, and you get to do that again if you have kids, but that part of us has to go away somehow, or that's a lesser quality usage of your time versus being productive. And, you know, I feel like a lot of people will, and I've said this before on the show, I think, maybe I dreamt this, that they'll talk the talk that we should be more imaginative, use your imagination, stay fun, stay creative. And then a lot of people don't let themselves do that. They don't walk the walk, essentially.
I think we're taught to believe that being a creative, possibly like you said, you could be considered, you're not being as productive, you're being lazy, it's foolish. But it's also a way of self-care. You have to have a certain degree, at least an hour a day for self-care. If you can't care for yourself and nurture yourself, you're not going to be able to help or do anything for anybody else. And eventually it's going to have you come back. You're going to be sick, stressed out, migraines, heart attack if you live a life like that, where you're
Right.
just always about the productivity.
It's just so compressed and you don't give yourself any fun.
Right.
Yeah. So we talked about the offerings for children, but you have three different, correct me if I'm wrong, three different types of offerings for adults, three different classes.
Yeah, I have 3 different ones on the website. But one is the Breaking the Rules. Maybe the Goddess. Is that what's on there? The Goddess, the Inner Warrior Doll.
I'm not sure. Maybe.
I have the Inner Warrior Doll class where you create a doll that's really just sort of a totem for yourself. We use different types of wood that might speak to different types of trees with different meanings. We wrap them in cloth. You're able to, as you're doing this, to wrap them with intention or prayer. Then we infuse them with little charms to kind of use as a totem to hold your essence or to serve as a reminder.
And then there's a third one, perhaps?
There's a third one. I have the Goddess. It's a clay bowl where you make a goddess bowl out of clay. Similar kind of concept.
Yeah. And how did you come to define that these are the three types of classes you wanted for people?
I switch them out quarterly.
Oh, okay.
But I also, I have a lot of women who recently have been coming to me that are in their 40s and 50s looking for classes to help just empower women or be in a group of women where, we don't have sewing circles or sewing bees anymore, which gave women a chance to have a circle time and talk with one another. So those were kind of ways that are set up that way too, that you could sit there, you could create something. It wasn't really labor intensive and didn't require a lot of intense thought and emotion, but you could also create and speak with your women within your circle.
Do you think there's a desire for community and friendship?
And there's desire for community and friendship as well.
And to do something that's fun, meaningful, and connecting at the same time.
Okay, and you'll have something meaningful to take home with you that you can either share, you could pass it on, and gives you something to, grow your circle.
That's another example of where that found you. You didn't craft that and cultivate that on purpose. This is something that you've started to see over time and a need for.
Right. And people, again, I think people just sort of find when you put it out there that this is what you do, people start to come to you to kind of answers. It's like a pull effect. You drop a rock in the water, it ripples out, and whatever's meant to be is going to come back towards you.
Yeah. And I kind of got this curiosity as I looked through your website, and I wanted to ask you about your thoughts, stepping back to a philosophical lens perhaps, but just the idea that art is up to interpretation and the subjectivity of art and how styles are so different from one another and how like one piece, like you could put two art pieces side by side and one becomes a national or a world treasure. It's a classic. And there's one sitting right next to it that may be done by the same person, or it looks very similar and it gets no light of day at all.
I think art is also, it's how it's perceived by the person viewing it. So as an artist, first of all, I make art. That's my language. That's my way that I speak. So I'm not always creating with the intent to sell something. I'm creating as a way to speak my authentic truth. So I guess that would depend on if my truth is resonating with you and which one speaks to you the most. And then also too, I think it just depends on where you're at the right time for some things artistically to take off. If someone, what people see it and what people don't, or, how do you exhibit that art? Are you just creating for yourself? It lives in your studio. Does it live in a gallery locally like downtown Loveland, or is it out national? Who sees that work?
Yeah. Do you think the terms good or bad art exist?
No, I don't. No, I'm not a believer in good or bad art. It's just whatever you're exercising and creating at the time.
Yeah. And how would you describe how you built your style? It just came from within and it evolved over time? It started back in childhood? And
mine evolved over time. Mine is very much a part of me. And as I'm looking around, it goes very much from what you see here. That's the really whimsical sort of dots and dashes that are inspired by Aboriginal and Mexican Huichol art. So dots and dashes, it's very meditative to do that. I'm actually writing a children's storybook. So these are actually pages from the children's storybook. It's about a little girl. Her name is Gladys. Gladys lives inside of a tree. So it's about Gladys's world. In the tree, tree. Gladys's world is very dark. Some people might find it very dark, but she finds it very magical. She never goes outside of the tree. So the other flip side of my work would be this darker, heavy collage piece. So it took me some years to finally be able to speak that part of me, because people don't always find that palatable when you're talking about certain aspects of your life. I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm inspired by Becky Holly's recent installation. So I also suffer from depression. So it's a way for me to speak that voice and put that out there. Doesn't mean that I actually feel that way 24/7, but when I have those feelings, it's a really great way to put that work out there. And it speaks to other people. I have a lot of collectors who it speaks to as well. So the book is about Ruby, Gladys, finding her own truth. So the two of them come together, and actually the end of it will be about her. I used to think she needs to leave the tree to go outside, but it's really now becoming more about people finding the beauty of her inside her tree and getting people to come inside the tree.
That's wonderful.
Did I answer the question or just go off on a tangent? I'm sorry as I'm rambling.
There is no question. Only a conversation. And I look up and see this raven, and it reminds me that it's like unlocking that part of yourself. I was writing a short story recently, and I got interested in ravens and crows, and I did a lot of background research and studies that have been done with them about their intelligence and some of the cultural things that they have with one another. And I just can't look at ravens and crows anymore the same. I will stop what I'm doing, and I just watch them, and I think, like, what are you doing now? What are you all up to? Because they're very intentional. They're very thoughtful and very intelligent.
They're very
birds.
intelligent.
Yeah, and so I just see that, and it just reminds me of this. And this is like a very small thing. It's a very small part of my day, even if I stop and watch them. But I think at some level, it still affects me.
Yeah, I love them. They actually, too, a lot of people probably perceive them as being something darker as well. But ravens actually, in different lores and legends, they are actually the messengers of light. So they were bringing the light to something new. They also, if you are an animal totem follower, believer, they actually are very closely related to wolves too, because they help lead wolves to food. And they're also linked to bear as well, in that bears and birds actually are two of the besides humans that walk on 2 feet.
Yeah, and crows, fascinatingly, will typically not nest further than 2 miles from where humans live. So they're very connected to our lifestyle, and they, for some reason, have enjoyed and evolved being right next to human civilization. I think
they're very interesting.
Yeah. So if people are intrigued, interested, maybe they think, I need a journey with Jules here, how should we send people your way?
You can check out the website at juicedonimagination.com. There's also an Instagram for that too, for Children Wise. And then you can follow me on Instagram under Jules Gillen Studio, Facebook as well. And then my phone number is listed on all of those social media platforms and on my website.
So if they want to get involved with the class or even just ask you some questions, maybe the website or give you a phone call?
Yeah, please feel free to call, drop a message. I'm pretty responsive. So I do prefer, actually, I'm going to be honest and say I do prefer that people call more than email. I feel like...
What?
I know. I feel like, and I'm not a huge texter as well. I feel like we are losing our human connection. So I like to talk to people. I get that a lot of people. Why can't we sign up for your classes online? It's because I want to talk to you. I want to know who's coming into my space, and I want you to know who you're working with as well. So what better way to do that than to connect voice-wise?
Okay, well, they've already heard you speak at this point. So, listener, if you're interested, give Jules a call, get juiced on imagination, and let's express ourselves in a way that's not words.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. If you enjoy The More You Know Co., please check out our other episodes. We've had such a variety of interesting and awesome people, you never know what you're going to find. I've been in awe and wonder going on this journey around northern Colorado. Read the episode descriptions, take a shot, and discover our NoCo community. Trevor Fossey, always putting in the time to edit and mix these episodes. Thank you so much for your dedication and hard work. Russell Isaac Long, our guest on episode 67 of the show, makes all our music here at The More You Know Co. Thank you, good sir. We are on Facebook and Instagram if you're interested in staying connected with us, or just to see bonus visual content in addition to this very audio-driven podcast experience. We will be back soon with another conversation, exploring and connecting the people who make up Northern Colorado. Until next time, peace!